In this next section, we'll write each fraction as a decimal. We're able to work backwards and do this using place value. Take a look at number 1. We're looking at 3 100ths. So let's think about the hundredths column. So we have our ones column, and then the decimal point, and then tenths, and then hundredths is our last column. To rewrite this fraction as a decimal, I'm going to put the numerator in these blanks such that the last digit of my numerator is the furthest right digit. So I have 3 in the hundredths column, and I have nothing else to fill in, so I'm going to put zeros everywhere else. So I get 0.03. For number 2, I can't do anything yet because I need my denominator, my number on bottom in my fraction, to be a power of 10. What do I mean by a power of 10? Well, it could be 1, it could be 10, it could be 100, it could be 1,000, it could be 10,000. The key is that it's 1 followed by a bunch of zeros. So let's take 20. A number that it goes into where it's 1 followed by a bunch of zeros is 100, because I know 20 times 5 is 100. So I'm going to change my fraction so that it's got a denominator of 100. So I'm going to take 3/20ths and multiply by 5/5. My numerator is 3 times 5, which is 15. And my denominator is 20 times 5, which is 100. All right, so now I can think about place value. I'm dealing with hundredths here because I've got 15 hundredths. So I'll think ones, decimal, tenths, hundredths. And I need to write 15 so that it ends in the hundredths column. So I'll have my 5 here and my 1. Now it says 15 ending in the hundredths column, and I'll fill in zeros the rest of the way. So 3/20ths is the same as 0.15. If you feel comfortable trying 3 and 4 on your own, please pause the video now to try them. If not, I'll work through them with you right now. For 3, I've got 10/25ths. I know that 25 times 4 is 100. So I'm going to multiply 10/25ths by 4 over 4 so that my denominator becomes 100. 10 times 4 gives me 40, and 25 times 4 gives me 100. So I'm looking at 40 100ths. There are 2 ways I can convert this to a decimal. One is using the same strategy I used for number 1 and number 2. So using that strategy, I see 100 as my denominator, and I could say ones column, decimal point, tenths column, hundredths column, and I want 40 to end in the hundredths column. So that'll put a 0 here and a 4. So now it says 40 ending in the hundredths column, and I'll fill in zeros in my blanks. So knowing about decimals, I know that I could write instead of 0.40, 0.4, because that means the exact same thing. So given that, here's another way I could have approached this problem. I could have taken my fraction, 40 hundredths, and simplified it to begin with, because 40 hundredths, both those numbers are divisible by 10. So if I divided each of them by 10, I'd get 4 tenths. And if I wanted to convert 4 tenths to a decimal, I could look at my ones column in my tenths column, and I would just want 4 to end in my tenths column, so I'd get 0.4. So either way, I get 0.4, but there are 2 ways of approaching it. Number 4. Now I need a number that starts with 1 and ends with zeros that 40 goes into. 40 is a hard number to think about. I wonder if we can simplify this fraction. Do 8 and 40 have anything in common? If you answered that they have a factor of 8 in common, you're correct. 8 divided by 8 gives me 1, and 40 divided by 8 gives me 5. So 8/40ths is the same as 1/5. Well, now that's a number that I know I can turn into a base 10, right? Because 5 times 2 is 10. So if I take 1/5 and multiply by 2 over 2, that changes my fraction into 2 tenths. So I've got 3 equivalent fractions here. I've represented this fraction as 8/40ths, 1/5, and 2 tenths. And now I can represent this as a decimal. I can think of my ones column, my decimal point, and my tenths column. 2 ends in my tenths column, and I'll fill in zeros everywhere else. So I get 0.2 as my decimal.